start this project, the Wright Roller, using these two pieces of material. This is Keith Fenners' design. He uses it to straighten prop shafts. You can set anything on there that you want to see if it's bent or how straight it is. I've been wanting to make one for about a year now to set hydraulic rods on and inspect them, make sure they're not bent or anything. That'll save a lot of time not having to set it up in the lathe. So he made his plans available for free on his website. I already machined down the edges of these to make sure that they're both the same. But I'm going to start by sticking them in the mill, poking a couple holes in them, flip it upright, make this slot here. A couple of bearings will go in here, protrude out here to where you can set your rod on. And this whole piece will be mounted on a trunnion so it can pivot and keep the rod in line with the bearing, so it could be put on any surface. It doesn't have to be a precision surface. And then where the two bearings are, where the shaft is sitting, those are your 0 points. And if there's any weeble wobble in between them, you know the shaft is bent. So let's get started. Old Rockwell Model 7V is a free bandsaw. Picked it up about 7 years ago. She sure cuts slow, but she cuts straight. Got a 3/4 horsepower swamp cooler motor. I scavenged to get it operational. I've been using it ever since. That's a dang straight cut. Quite amazing. First step, dress the part to length. I'll have to cut out this radius. Probably just find an end mill close enough. Come in here and plunge it. And eyeball these outside radiuses. Poke a couple holes in it. Flip the part. Knock this out where the two bearings are going to go. So the plans call for 6-inch pieces. When I bought this, I ordered 12. They graciously gave me about a 1/16 extra. My measurements and saw cut: 5.991, 5.932. It's pretty dang good for a saw cut. So it's non-critical, I think. Let these things down to like a 5.8, and that'll be plenty fine for what we're making. We moved over 6 plus 0.5 6.5 for the cutter. I'm gonna take a scratch pass and see what it takes. Okay, it wasn't much. Okay. 40 thousandths under 6 inches on that. So I moved over 6.5 and 3/10. Let's see what she takes off. Nothing. Yeah, we're hitting. This one's close enough for what we're working with. that's these two pieces done. Got the 2 holes drilled and reamed for where the bearings go. This hole will have a keeper that comes out and holds these pins in, and it also has a spacer that goes in between to keep the tube from pinching or expanding under heavy load. I think that's a big detail for the strength of this thing. Knocked out the top. We still have to add the radius here, but that's just going to be kind of some eyeballing. We'll get it after with the grinder. I probably will take some radius gauges and give myself a mark so it looks halfway decent. Out here, it's not in the print, but the end cap that's going to go in here with the trunnion shaft, I'm just going to plug weld all the way around. That way I don't have to worry about welding in here and messing with the smoothness. I might have to put it in the machine and flatten it off. That should prevent having to do any of that. So that turned out well. We have 2 pieces exactly the same. Off camera I did take my chamfer tool and just knock all the burrs off these holes. Quite a bit of burrs inside. I'll reach in there with the burr and knock them off. One thing to think about, this seam where they put the tube together, depending on what factory the tube comes out of, sometimes this, oh, I bumped the camera, hold on. Sometimes the seam is right in the middle, sometimes it's over on the end like this. Just depends on how they have the machine set up that's rolling this stuff. So I did make sure that the seam was at the bottom on both of them. Otherwise I'd have to get in there and knock that down in order to fit the bearings. So with it being at the bottom like that, I will have to knock it down a little bit to get that end cap in. But I won't have to do the whole thing if it was up here in the middle where the bearings are going. The next part is going to be this pivot block. That's what's going to go in the end here with, what's that, a 5/8 pin sticking out the side. I don't have any 3/4 stock. I have some 1-inch flat bar scrap laying around. I'll probably just make some chips and deck it down to 3/4 rather than buying a piece. So next will be to make the pivot block and then also the pivot support, which this piece will be welded to the base with a through hole with this pin locating to allow this piece to pivot.